Think.
I think I got this.
So I finally got around to playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I was blown away by how much fun it is. The world is absolutely gorgeous, exploring it is a real treat. Combat is super engaging.
Let's finish this.
Switching between characters pulling off these awesome combos makes every fight exciting. The story is captivating too. Seeing these familiar characters again with some new twists is just fantastic. They really captured the magic of the original while adding their own spin, which is really cool. Even the side quests are enjoyable. They actually add to the world and the story instead of just being boring filler. Now, it's not perfect, of course. I did have a couple of minor issues. The camera can be a little wonky sometimes, especially in close quarters, and I did run into a few little glitches here and there. Plus, some of the dialogue can be a bit cheesy at times. But honestly, even with those small problems, I thoroughly enjoyed Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's a fantastic game, and I would definitely recommend it to any fan of RPGs or anyone just looking for a really fun adventure.
Bring it!
Mark this. He's not just any monkey. He's a monkey of merit.
Black Myth Wukong is an action RPG based on the classic Chinese legend of the Monkey King, and it's absolutely fantastic. The visuals are mind-blowing, the environments are so detailed, and the character models are just stunning. The combat is really deep and challenging. You have to master different techniques and abilities to defeat the various enemies, and it feels so rewarding. I loved exploring the world and discovering all the hidden secrets. The story is really engaging too. It's a great take on the classic tale. Honestly, I don't really have any major complaints. Maybe if I had to nitpick, I'd say some of the boss fights are incredibly difficult, but even that adds to the sense of accomplishment. It's a truly special game, and it's definitely one of the best action RPGs I've played in a long time. Celeste is all about climbing a mountain, but it's way more than just that. It's about Madeline facing her inner demons, and the way they weave that into the gameplay is just brilliant. The platforming is so tight and responsive, you feel totally in control of Madeline as she climbs and dashes through these crazy levels. I loved exploring each area, finding hidden strawberries, and learning new movement tricks. Okay, some levels were really tough, I'm not gonna lie. There were times I almost rage quit, but that feeling when you finally beat a hard part is so incredibly satisfying. The music is absolutely fantastic too. It really sets the mood and makes those tough climbs feel even more epic. Honestly, I can't think of anything I didn't like, maybe just that I wanted even more of it because I was completely hooked from beginning to end. It's a game that stays with you even after you've finished it. I played Ghost of Tsushima a while back now, and it still stands out as one of the most beautiful open-world games I've ever experienced. Exploring the island of Tsushima is breathtaking. The scenery is absolutely gorgeous, and the way the wind blows through the grass and trees is just mesmerizing. The combat is really satisfying too. Learning different stances and mastering the katana feels great.
This is for Komodo.
The story is compelling and the characters are well developed. I really felt invested in Jin's journey. It's not perfect though. Some of the side quests can be a bit repetitive, and the stealth mechanics aren't always the best. Also, while the world is beautiful, some areas can feel a little empty, but even with those small issues, this game is amazing. If you're looking for a beautiful open-world game with great combat and a compelling story, you should definitely give it a try.
Help's on the way, Erend.
So I finally got around to playing Horizon Forbidden West, and I was completely blown away. The world is absolutely stunning, so beautiful and detailed. Exploring it was a genuine pleasure. The combat is fantastic too. Fighting those giant machines is so thrilling and satisfying. They've improved on the first game in so many ways. The story is more engaging, the characters are more interesting, and there's just so much more to do. I love learning about the different tribes and uncovering all the secrets of this post-apocalyptic world.
Take you out.
It's not perfect though. Sometimes the climbing can be a little clunky, and I did experience a few minor glitches here and there. Also, while the main story is great, Some of the side quests felt a little repetitive, but even with those small issues, this game is incredible. It's a must-play for anyone who enjoys open-world games or just a good action RPG.
Here.
The place is coming down!
Okay.
Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is this exciting action-adventure game where you step into the shoes of Indy himself and go on a globe-trotting quest to uncover a mysterious ancient artifact. It's got everything you'd expect from an Indiana Jones game: thrilling chases, challenging puzzles, and plenty of exploration. I really love the way they captured the spirit of the movies. The game feels very authentic, and it's full of those classic Indy moments. The combat is fun too. It's a mix of brawling and using your whip, and it feels really satisfying.
Yeah? Well, I should have done a lot of things.
The story is engaging. It's a classic Indiana Jones adventure with plenty of twists and turns. If I had to mention a small downside, maybe it's that some of the puzzles can be a little bit easy, but honestly, that didn't detract too much from my enjoyment. Overall, it's a fantastic game, and if you're a fan of Indiana Jones or action-adventure games in general, then I highly recommend it. Little Nightmares 2 is this super creepy and atmospheric puzzle platformer where you play as Mono, a little boy with a paper bag on his head, and you team up with Six from the first game to escape this terrifying world. It's a really suspenseful game, and the atmosphere is just incredible. It's full of these unsettling visuals and sounds that really get under your skin. The puzzles are well designed and they make good use of the environment. I loved the way the story unfolds. It's very mysterious, and you're constantly trying to piece together what's going on. It's definitely a scary game. There are some genuinely creepy moments that made me jump. If I had to say anything negative, maybe it's that some parts can be a little frustrating if you get stuck on a puzzle. But overall, it's a fantastic game. If you enjoyed the first one, or if you're just a fan of horror games with a focus on atmosphere and story, then I highly recommend checking it out. Metaphor Refantatio is a really neat RPG where you're unraveling a big mystery in a fantasy world with a cool mix of turn-based combat and some unique twists. The art style is really eye-catching. It's very distinct and gives the game a lot of charm. The combat is strategic and enjoyable. There are loads of different characters you can recruit, and each one has their own special skills, so you can really build your dream team. I had a blast trying out different party combinations and figuring out the best ways to beat the bad guys. The story is also pretty gripping with lots of twists and turns that kept me guessing. If I had to point out a little something, maybe it's that the game can be a bit tough. Sometimes some of the boss fights are pretty challenging, but honestly, that just made it feel even better when I finally won. All in all, it's a great RPG, and if you're into games with a good story, fun combat, and a unique vibe, then you should definitely check it out. I played No Man's Sky a few years ago when it first came out, and honestly, it was a bit rough, but I decided to give it another go recently, and wow, has it changed. Exploring these vast alien worlds is just incredible. There's so much to see and discover. Flying your spaceship from planet to planet, finding new resources and weird creatures is seriously addictive. They've added so much stuff too, like base building and freighters and all sorts of things to do. It feels like a completely different game, but it's still got some of its old quirks. Sometimes the game can feel a little repetitive, just flying around scanning stuff. And I did run into a couple of little bugs here and there. Even with those small issues though, I'm having a blast with this game. It's a huge game with tons of content, and if you're looking for a chill space exploration game, you should definitely check it out, especially now since it's so much better than it used to be. Ori and the Will of the Wisps is this gorgeous Metroidvania game where you play as Ori, a little spirit who has to save his forest and his friends. It's a really beautiful game. The visuals are stunning, and the world is so full of life. The platforming is incredibly smooth and responsive. You feel so fluid as you're jumping and dashing around. I loved exploring the different areas. Each one is unique and has its own challenges. The combat is also really fun. There are lots of different abilities you can unlock and upgrade. It can be a bit challenging at times. Some of the boss fights are pretty tough, but it's never unfair. Honestly, it's hard to find anything I didn't like about this game. Maybe if I had to nitpick, I'd say the story is a little bit simple, but it's still very heartfelt. Overall, it's a fantastic game. It's a must-play for any fan of Metroidvanias or platformers. Pentiment is a really unique game where you play as an artist in 16th century Bavaria and you get to investigate a murder. It's not your typical murder mystery, though it's more about the characters and their lives, and the choices you make really impact the story and how it unfolds. I loved the art style. It looks like an illuminated manuscript and it gives the game this really distinctive look. The writing is excellent too. The dialogue feels very natural and the characters are all well developed. It's not a fast-paced action game. It's more about talking to people, exploring the town, and piecing together clues. Honestly, I don't really have any major complaints. It's a very well-crafted game. Maybe if I had to say something negative, it's that it's not for everyone. If you're looking for a lot of action, this might not be your cup of tea. But if you enjoy story-driven games with interesting characters and meaningful choices, then I highly recommend it. It's definitely a game that makes you think. Hollow Knight is this amazing Metroidvania game where you explore this huge interconnected world as a silent knight. It's got this beautiful hand-drawn art style that's both creepy and charming, and the world just feels so alive and mysterious. The combat is really fun too. It's challenging, but fair, and there are tons of different abilities and charms you can find to customize your playstyle. I love discovering all the hidden areas and uncovering the secrets of Hallownest. It's a world that's just begging to be explored. Some of the boss fights were seriously tough. I spent ages trying to beat some of them, but that feeling when you finally take one down is incredible. Honestly, I don't really have any complaints. The game is just so well made and polished. Maybe if I had to nitpick, I'd say some areas can be a little confusing to navigate at first, but even that adds to the sense of exploration. It's a game that I can see myself coming back to again and again. I recently played Astro Bot, and it's such a charming and fun platformer where you play as Astro Bot on a mission to rescue his crew who are scattered across different planets. It's a really joyful game, and it's full of creative level designs and clever gameplay mechanics. The platforming is super tight and responsive. It feels so good to run, jump, and hover around these colorful worlds. I loved collecting all the little Astro Bots. They're hidden everywhere, and finding them is a big part of the fun. The game looks fantastic too. It's bright and cheerful, and it really makes great use of the PlayStation features. Honestly, it's hard to find anything I didn't like about this game. Maybe if I had to nitpick, I'd say it's a little on the short side, but it's so consistently enjoyable that it doesn't really matter. It's a perfect game for anyone who loves platformers or just wants a lighthearted and fun experience. So I finally got around to playing Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown last month, and honestly, this game surprised me with how good it is. The combat is super smooth and satisfying, like you really feel every hit, and the platforming is so much fun. Zipping around the world feels great. Exploring the different areas is a treat. They're all so well designed, and the story, while not groundbreaking, is actually pretty engaging. I found myself wanting to know what happened next. Although the game is not perfect, I did run into a few minor glitches here and there. Nothing game-breaking, but a little annoying, and the boss fights, while cool, could be a bit repetitive sometimes. But overall, this game is a fantastic experience. If you're looking for a fun action-adventure game with great combat and exploration, you should definitely check it out. Baldur's Gate 3 is an absolutely incredible RPG. The level of freedom you have in this game is insane. You can make so many choices that actually impact the story and the world around you. The combat is really deep and strategic, plus there are so many different classes and abilities to experiment with. And the characters are fantastic. I got really invested in their stories and their relationships. Exploring the Forgotten Realms is a real treat too. There's so much to discover. It's a huge game though, so it can be a little overwhelming at times, and I did run into a few minor bugs. Also, the graphics aren't always the most cutting edge, but even with those small issues, this is still easily one of the top 5 games from the last 5 years. If you're a fan of RPGs or just love games with deep stories and lots of choices, you absolutely have to play it. Elden Ring is a massive and challenging game that I've sunk countless hours into exploring. The open world is absolutely incredible. There's so much to discover, and every corner feels like it holds a secret. The combat is tough, but rewarding. Finally beating a boss after trying again and again is such a great feeling. Building your character and finding new weapons and armor is really fun too. And there are tons of options to choose from. It's definitely not easy though. This game is hard, like really hard, and it can be frustrating at times. Also, the story is a bit cryptic and you have to piece it together yourself, which some people might not like. But even with the difficulty and the somewhat vague story, I absolutely love this game. If you're looking for a challenging and rewarding open-world experience, you should definitely give it a try.
Onward and upward!
So I finally got around to playing Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and honestly, it was such a fun surprise. I mean, I knew it would be good, but it was even better than I expected. The way they've mixed up the classic Mario formula with these crazy new Wonder Flowers is brilliant. Some of the level transformations are just wild, and the new badges add a whole other layer of fun.
That Goomba looks so sweet. Well then.
You can turn into a Goomba or even have your character float around. It's just silly and addictive. The levels themselves are beautifully designed too. They're bright and colorful and full of secrets. Some are easy peasy, but others will really test your platforming skills, and the boss fights are pretty cool though. I did wish there were a few more unique ones, but overall this game is just pure, unadulterated fun. It's perfect for playing with friends or family, and it's one of those games that just makes you happy. So if you're looking for a game that's guaranteed to put a smile on your face, you should definitely give this one a try. Space Marine 2 is all about brutal third-person combat where you play as a Space Marine fighting hordes of Tyranids. It's a non-stop action game, and it really captures that feeling of being an unstoppable force of nature. The combat is visceral and satisfying. You can chain together melee attacks and ranged weapons, and it all feels really impactful. I loved the variety of weapons and abilities. There's a lot of different ways to customize your playstyle. The game looks great too, the graphics are really impressive, and the environments are detailed. It can get a little repetitive at times. You are fighting a lot of the same enemies over and over again. And sometimes the story missions can feel a little bit linear. But if you're looking for a game where you can just unleash a ton of firepower and smash some bugs, then you'll probably have a good time with this one. It's definitely a fun and action-packed experience. Cuphead is this incredibly stylish run-and-gun game where you play as these two cartoon cups who made a deal with the devil and now have to fight a bunch of crazy bosses to repay their debt. The visuals are absolutely amazing. It looks like a 1930s cartoon brought to life. The animation is so smooth and the character designs are so creative. The gameplay is tough as nails. I'm not gonna lie, it's a very challenging game, but it's also incredibly rewarding. Each boss fight is like its own unique puzzle. You have to learn their attack patterns and figure out how to dodge them. I love the variety of weapons and abilities you can unlock. It can get frustrating at times, you'll die a lot, but that feeling when you finally beat a boss that's been giving you trouble is just so satisfying. Honestly, the only real downside is that it's a very difficult game, so it might not be for everyone. But if you're up for a challenge and you appreciate beautiful art and tight gameplay, then I highly recommend giving it a shot. Red Dead Redemption 2 remains one of the most immersive and engaging open-world experiences I've ever had. The world is just incredible, so detailed and alive, and exploring it feels like a real adventure. The story is fantastic too, with well-developed characters and a really compelling narrative. I got completely lost in Arthur Morgan's journey, and I cared about what happened to him and the rest of the gang. It's a very long game though, so it can take a while to finish, and some of the missions can feel a bit repetitive.
Look out ahead!
Also, the online mode wasn't as engaging as I hoped, but even with those small issues, this game is a masterpiece. If you're looking for a truly immersive and unforgettable open-world game, you absolutely have to play it.
You're out of here.
Sakuna of Rice and Ruin is this really cool mix of action, platforming, and farming. You play as Sakuna, a spoiled harvest goddess who gets banished to a dangerous island and has to learn to cultivate rice and fight monsters. The combat is surprisingly deep. There's a lot of different combos and skills to learn, and it feels really satisfying to take down enemies. But the farming aspect is just as important. You have to carefully manage your rice paddies to grow the best possible rice, and that rice actually makes Sakuna stronger, so it's all connected. I loved the art style. It's really vibrant and colorful, and the characters are all charming. It can be a bit grindy at times. You do spend a lot of time tending to your rice, and some of the combat challenges can be tough. But overall, it's a really unique and enjoyable game. If you like action games with a bit of a twist, or if you've ever wanted to try virtual rice farming, then I definitely recommend checking it out. I played Zelda Breath of the Wild a while back now, and it still remains one of my absolute favorite open-world games. Exploring Hyrule is just magical. There's so much to discover, and every corner feels like it holds a secret. The freedom you have in this game is amazing. You can climb almost anything and approach challenges in so many different ways. The combat is fun too, and learning all the different techniques is really satisfying. It's not perfect though. The story is a little thin and some of the shrines can be a bit repetitive. Also, the weapon durability system can be a little annoying. But even with those small issues, this game is a masterpiece. If you haven't played it yet, you absolutely should, especially if you love open world games or just a good adventure. Dragon's Dogma 2 is an action RPG where you create your own character and explore a huge open world full of monsters, quests, and secrets. It's got a really cool pawn system where you can create companions to fight alongside you and even share them with other players online. The combat is really fun and dynamic. There are lots of different classes and abilities to choose from, and it feels great to take down a giant monster. I loved exploring the world, discovering new locations, and meeting all sorts of interesting characters. The story is pretty engaging too. It's a classic fantasy tale with some interesting twists. If I had to mention a little something negative, maybe the graphics aren't the absolute best, but they're still pretty good. But overall, it's a fantastic RPG, and if you're a fan of open-world games with great combat and a lot of freedom, then I definitely recommend it. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is a dark and intense action game where you play as Senua, a warrior who's battling her own mental health struggles while fighting to save her people. It's a really immersive experience, and the visuals are absolutely stunning. They're so realistic and detailed. The combat is brutal and visceral. It feels very weighty and impactful. I love the way they incorporated Senua's mental state into the gameplay. The voices in her head and the visual hallucinations really add to the atmosphere.
What have you done? Stop.
Squeeze out!
It's a very emotional game and it deals with some heavy themes. If I had to mention anything negative, it's that the game can be quite short and some might find the combat a little repetitive. But overall, it's a powerful and unforgettable experience. It's a game that stays with you long after you've finished it.
Fiskmen have fled through the building. Eliminate them.
So I finally got my hands on Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and let me tell you, this game is amazing. Swinging through New York City feels so good. It's smooth and fast and just so much fun. The combat is even better than before with new moves and gadgets that make every fight exciting. Playing as both Peter and Miles is really cool too. They both have their own unique abilities and storylines. The story itself is really engaging with some great moments and some surprising twists.
Is that a Higgs field? That's actually really cool.
It's not perfect though. I did notice a few small graphical glitches here and there, and sometimes the open world can feel a little overwhelming with so much to do. Also, while the story is great, some of the side missions are a bit repetitive. But honestly, even with those little issues, this game is fantastic. If you're a Spider-Man fan or just love superhero games, you absolutely have to play it. Stalker 2 is this gritty survival game where you explore the Chernobyl exclusion zone, and it's a pretty intense experience. It's an open world and it's full of dangers from mutated creatures to rival factions, and the atmosphere is just incredible. It's so creepy and immersive. I loved exploring the zone, discovering hidden stashes and uncovering the secrets of what happened there. The shooting mechanics are solid, and the survival elements, like managing your resources, add a lot to the tension. It can be a tough game though. The zone is a dangerous place and you'll die a lot. And sometimes the game can be a bit buggy. But if you're looking for a challenging and atmospheric survival game, then I definitely recommend it. It's a really unique experience. Unravel is this beautiful puzzle platformer where you play as Yarny, a little creature made of yarn who's on a journey to reconnect with lost memories. It's a really emotional game, and the visuals are absolutely stunning. They're so detailed and vibrant. The gameplay is pretty clever too. You use Yarny's yarn to solve puzzles and swing across gaps. It's a really unique mechanic. I loved exploring the different environments. Each one feels so distinct and tells its own little story. The puzzles are generally well designed. Some can be a little tricky, but they're never too frustrating. If I had to nitpick, I'd say the story is a little bit vague. At times, it could have been nice to have a bit more context. But overall, it's a really charming and heartfelt game. If you're looking for a relaxing puzzle platformer with gorgeous visuals and a touching story, then I definitely recommend giving it a try. I played The Witcher 3 a few years back, and even now it's easily one of the best open-world games I've ever touched. The world is just massive and gorgeous. I mean, you can literally get lost for hours just exploring and discovering hidden little spots. And the side quests are actually really well done. They're not just boring fetch quests, which is a breath of fresh air. Combat takes a bit to get used to. It can be a little clunky at first, but once you figure it out, it's actually pretty satisfying. But the real star of the show is the story. It's so well written, and the characters are so well developed, you actually feel like you know them. And with the recent next-gen patch, it looks even better now. The visuals are sharper, and the performance is smoother, making the whole experience even more immersive. Overall, this game is a masterpiece. It's definitely a must-play, and I can totally see myself going back to it again someday.